is the real estate guru of Miami-Dade County, Peter Zalewski. Peter, thank you for being here.
Michael, it's always a pleasure.
And just for history, you used to be reporter for Miami Herald.
I wrote a column for the Miami Herald. I wrote a column for the Miami Real Deal. I was a reporter with Miami Today back in the day, South Florida Business Journal, something called World City, which is a trade publication, as well as the Miami Daily Business Review, where I wrote about banking.
Right. And you finally said, enough of that. I'm going to go do something else.
Well, I did it at a moment that felt much like where we were last year. We were at the peak of the market in 2006. I saw that stuff was probably going to go sideways, and I figured, how can I take advantage of it? So I left journalism, and I went into the real estate game.
So, Peter, tell us the big difference between the condo market today, and that's what we're going to be talking about, condo market, and the condo market from a year ago. What is going on?
Well, something happened dramatic in the third quarter. Where suddenly pricing and transactions, depending on which side you look at it, changed dramatically. So there was a moment, there was a T in the road, and it seems as if the market's going in a different direction than it had been going for quite some time. And we discovered it in looking at the statistics. We do something called an index. So we have an index where we're tracking active listings as well as pending sales, just to give us an indication of what the closed sales are going to be. Closed sales come 60, 90, 30. 120 days afterwards. So you never really know where it is. So you're kind of waiting for it, but the index is giving us week over week over week. So the end of the quarter came of third quarter of 2025. So we looked at it and it looked pretty dramatic. So we dug into the pricing and we saw that we are effectively jumping out of a plane. Have you ever gone skydiving before, Michael?
No.
Well, people in the condo market, they're skydiving right now. They're hoping they're going to pull that ripcord and they're hoping it's going to be a soft landing.
Oh my God.
That is probably the best visual I can give you because.
And how long have you been doing this type of reporting?
I got here in 1993. So I've written about real estate, banking, and stuff like that basically since 1993. As a journalist, I did it 13 years and then almost 20 years.
So you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I've seen a couple cycles, and I've seen developers build, and I've also seen their kids grow up and build. So yeah, I've seen a little bit of the market.
And it's not that he's bearish, but the reality is the data proves that out.
Yeah, I'm effectively a trader. Yeah. So I'm looking at it from a trader perspective. Yeah. Where is the opportunity? What's going on? And right now, I would say, you're probably on the sell side, but in order to sell, you're probably going to have to be bold and cut significantly because buyers who are going in, they're being incentivized by price discounts. Yes. And that's what the numbers are showing.
And before we move on, Emily, let's say hello to Emily. Where are you, Emily? Oh, there she is. Emily's our producer, and we have Alex over there on the other side. Emily graduated from FIU a few months ago.
Congrats.
And so not only does she produce shows, she's also has a show called Emily, Everything with Emily, all right, appear at least once a week. And there's Tico from Strive 305. Peter.
Hey, Tico, how's it going?
And say hi to Peter.
How are you? Good to see you.
Very well. Likewise.
Excellent. Good to see everybody out there. Strive 305 in the house.
Nice.
The number one individual here, Miami Community News. I like you too. He's my favorite.
Well, you obviously don't own, because if you own, you wouldn't like what I'm saying.
I'm going to have to stay here and listen.
All right, Tico, see you. So lots of data is changing things. You said that people are hoping they're going to be able to pull it off. But for the uninitiated like myself, when we saw that the Fed lowered the rate a little bit, did that do anything? And is that a real way out of this?
Okay, so let me sort of set the scene for everybody. So the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank, it's run by a guy called Jerome Powell. You always hear about Jerome Powell. They do meetings 10 times a year, and they decide what they're going to do with interest rate. What they do with interest rates basically has an impact on mortgage rates, on your credit card rate, on your car loan rate, on all that type of stuff. So this Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell, they have basically two responsibilities. One is to get inflation under control and maintain it at about 2%. The other one is maximum jobs. If we all remember during the pandemic, inflation went as high as 9.1%. So the Fed and Jerome Powell said, listen, we need to get that under control. And the way you get it under control is you raise rates and you keep them firm. And this way people don't have access to money. And if they do have access to money, it's expensive. So they slow down their consumption. And that's what we were doing. We got as low as 2.3%. I think it was April of this year. Then we had the tariffs come. Then we had a bunch of changes occur. Our inflation is now running at 2.9%. So we're supposed to be at 2. We got to 2.3. Now we're at 2.9. Some are saying it could go to 3.3 by the end of the year for a variety of different reasons, including...
End of the year is only 2 months from now.
And that's the expectation, including labor. Remember, we have an immigration policy that's also cutting into the labor. So we got that side. So we're supposed to be at 2. We're now at 2.9. So the Fed and Jerome Powell in August, when they were out there in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where they have their annual meeting, their brainstorming session, they came to the realization that they're seeing something on the job market side, which had been very firm. Remember during the pandemic, people, you're not paying me enough. I'm going to go to this company, and then I'm going to go to that company. I'm going to do it. Well, it's all changed. So Jerome Powell, who's been focused on inflation for 42 months, we got to get it under control. We got to get it under control. They suddenly pivoted and they said, oh my gosh, the job market's going soft real fast. So we need to switch. Now, when you go to try to bolster jobs, you cut interest rates. People get access to cash. They go out, they expand, they hire people. So now the Fed, who'd been focused and hadn't completed the inflation job, they're now focused on employment. So what that has done, long way to answer your question, the Federal Reserve cut rates on the 17th of September. It's the first time they had done it in 9 months. They cut rates by 25 basis points, a quarter of a percentage point. So when they cut rates, mortgage rates went up. When you say, well, they should go down, they went up. Why did they go up? Because the mortgage rates are based on investors buying the debt. And they said, oh my gosh, we might have a problem with the job market. We now need more money in order to take on the risk. So while President Trump was really pushing for interest rate cuts to bolster the housing market, in effect, what's happened, we've actually jacked up the mortgage rates. They went from about 6.17 the day before Jerome Powell made the cut. Today, they're coming in about 6.35. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, but if you have $1 million condo, you have $1 million house, you have a $5 million house, assuming you have a mortgage on it, it can get costly.
So how is this going to get all balanced out? I see it. I'm a simple guy, but I grew up with in the car, clutch, brake, gas, and gears. And sometimes you could use the gear to slow down. And we frequently did that. And so I see this with the economy and the jobs. When I saw the job rate opportunities that came back, it was miserable. So that means that a lot of people aren't getting employed. I can tell you that we had in 4 weeks, we had probably 4 or 5 times more people apply for work than last year. So what does that mean? And in the small business like ourselves, we're trying to figure that out and the impact that it has. But in particular downtown, because there are a lot of condos down there. You have the vintage ones 30 years or older, then you have the ones that are just online, and then you have ones right on Brickell Avenue all over that haven't even come online yet. So these people that are just starting building, do they anticipate in advance, we can't do anything for 2 years anyway until it gets up. So how do they balance that?
So I'm going to answer that question, and I'm going to answer it talking about the Sheridan. Remember the old Sheridan in Bell Harbor?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to get to that, but before I do, I do want to throw out to you, though, you're talking about the job market. Well, the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell, they rely on data. Data. They always say they're data dependent. Well, because the government has shut down, they didn't get the job data, which should have come out last week. So they don't have the job data. So you got to track 2 things, jobs and inflation. You don't have the job data for this month. They're meeting again to talk about interest rates in about 2 weeks, okay? Now, inflation numbers are coming out in 2 weeks, right before they meet. So if they don't get that number, how do they make any decisions if they're data dependent and there's no data?
So is the Fed going to try to balance out, hey, listen, we need jobs, so we're going to forget inflation. We're not going to deal with that now. We're going to deal with that later.
That's a decision that they made, but now they don't have the job numbers because the government's shut. And then the job data that does come out,
carefully arranged.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, and then if we're shut long enough, the U.S. government, you're not going to have inflation numbers. So how do you make a decision if you're data dependent and there is no data?
Yeah. Speaking of data, can we talk about some of these screenshots we have?
Yes.
Let's put those up, Emily. Is this the first one? There we go. Condo Cliff Index.
Condo Cliff Index. Yeah, coming into 2025.
Cliff like this?
Yeah, well, coming into 2025, we called it the Florida Condo Association Financial Cliff. And the cliff is based on the idea that all of these inspections that are required and funding that is required because of the Surfside disaster back in June of 2021, where nearly 100 people died and they ultimately paid $1 billion out to the families of the victim. We said that 2025 was going to be the moment where the rubber kind of hit the road. Now, suddenly people living in these older condos, they were actually going to have to pay what it costs to go forward. And as a result of that, we were expecting the market pretty much to go over a cliff. Now, if you look at these charts we have, we've actually tracked all 3 counties, Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach County, and then the line in black is going to be South Florida overall if you blend it all over.
So Miami-Dade is
going to be the blue one.
The blue one, okay.
The black one will be South Florida. The orange one is going to be Broward County, and then the green one will be Palm Beach County. So what that's telling you is that's giving you an indicator of closed sales that'll be coming out 30, 60, 90, 120 days in the future. It's done week over week over week. We pull active listings, we pull pending sales, we divide them, we multiply them, and we come up with a number, and we do it every single week. We do it on Tuesdays because deals that are negotiated over the weekend, they're typically updated by Tuesday. So Tuesday, we're getting the latest numbers. And what you can see here on the chart is you can see that everything is starting to head downward. And as it heads downward, you sort of ask yourself, why is it going downward? Because ideally, every time there's a new listing, you ought to have a pending sale. Or for every 2 new listings, you should have a pending sale. But if they're moving in opposite directions, maybe where you have more pending sales and less listings, that means the market's strong. If you have more listings and less pending sales, that means the market's weak. So it's a way to give you a sense of kind of where we are. So this is the overall market. And what you would see is if you go all the way back to the beginning when we launched it on January the 1st to coincide with the what we call the condo cliff, it's actually up about 4%. So you say, well, Peter, that's good. So we said, well, why is it up 4% given what the market is? And what we found in looking through the data, there's been a 33% cut in pricing. So if you looked at the pricing at the end of December and you look at what the pricing came out to in third quarter of this year, which would have been July and September, it's down 33%, roughly.
The average selling price.
Average selling price of a condo. Now, what's interesting is if you look at the vintage are those buildings that are 30 years or more. Why is it 30 years? Because of new state legislation related to Surfside, where they want to go in and inspect the older buildings, make sure you can identify what the problem is so we don't have a repeat of Surfside, and then put money aside. So we took a look at the vintage, and I don't know if Emily can pull up the next chart. That's going to show you the vintage. That's 30 years or more. That's a nice way to say old.
So this is it, right?
Yep. What you're going to see on the vintage is you don't necessarily have the same amount of reactions, generally speaking, although Palm Beach County is falling off a cliff right there. If you see the green one, It's falling off a cliff. Now, what we found in digging into the vintage, remember, 30 years or more, they've only discounted about 18%. Remember, overall discount 33% on pricing. These are closed transactions versus vintage, old stuff, about 18%. So what we're discovering is the owners of old buildings, they're not willing to cut bait, or maybe they can't afford to cut bait and let it go, versus the people with overall units are willing to cut bait. So you're seeing a bifurcation. You're seeing the overall market go positive, and you're seeing the vintage start to get hammered.
So if you're a seller, it hurts. But if you're a buyer, there's a lot of opportunities.
Well, if you overall market, there's a lot of opportunities, down 33%. But remember, we went back and we looked at the numbers going from the pandemic era, and we appreciate about 69%. So even a 33% discount, you're still too high. You're still too high. Beginning of the year, I called a 40% discount on pricing from pandemic highs. People said I was crazy. Well, we're starting to see it bear out already. Now, the thing with real estate is it always takes 3 times as long, and it typically costs twice as much. So you're starting to see it finally take hold, because we saw the supply building, we saw the sales closing, falling off, and then what ultimately happens? There's a moment of capitulation. Now, typically it's triggered by a black swan, like Lehman Brothers back in the day, or maybe it was what happened with the .com boom and bust. Yep. So there's always something. But right now, something is underway on the condo side. Now, how does that impact most of the people who live in houses? Well, many people don't realize that when you live horizontal in a house, chances are you're making money off the people living vertical. Whether you're doing interior design, you're doing transactions, you're doing the title work, maybe you're a maintenance person, maybe, whatever, you're laying tile, any of that type of stuff. So when vertical goes bad, it impacts and it works its way through almost like a tsunami into the single family house market. And if people who are over leveraged, maybe they leased that Maserati because they deserved it. Maybe they're sending their kids to school for $100,000 a year. Maybe all this type of stuff.
Like Publishers Clearinghouse.
Yeah, exactly. So the numbers are suggesting that we're starting to intensify, which has already been a slowdown. So if you are in the real estate market, if you're a realtor in particular, I would tell you be very clear and deliberate on any kind of new listing you take, because chances are you're just wasting your time. Unless there's a bold move on pricing, it's not going to trade. So then the question becomes, if the overall market's been cut 33%, and vintage have only been cut, remember, 30 years or more, only 18%. Does that mean vintage needs to go down even further in order to make it enticing, incentivized. And if you could change the chart now and show us numbers, because nobody wants to listen to me. I got nothing to say. But if you look here at these numbers, these are going to be annual numbers for condos. This is Tri-County, South Florida, Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach County. Black is going to be the overall market, and you will see blue is going to be vintage. That's old. So go ahead and take a look at the list. See how it's just fallen off?
Yep.
And that decline, if you will, is basically all. It was slow in Q1, first quarter. It was slow in the second quarter. Third quarter fell off the table. But vintage is still somewhat holding firm. But the overall market, though, and then this creates downward pressure. This creates people, I got to get out. I don't want to be the last rat left on the ship, and so on and so forth.
So in the downtown area, generically, all right?
Yep.
Are there certain areas in there that are inherently doing better? Not just in pricing, but in sales?
Well, no. Across the board. Blanket statement across the board.
Oh, my God.
It's not good. And if you want to know what real pricing is, and the industry hates me for saying this, a lot of stuff, by the way, I should say I am not authorized by the industry to come out and talk. I tend to annoy a lot of the figureheads, the talking heads, if you will. But if you want to know what your place is worth, how much can you rent it for? Whatever your rent is, that's called the 1% rule. So if I get $1,000 a month in rent, that means my place is worth $100,000. I get $10,000 a month rent, that means my place is worth $1 million. So whatever place you're living in right now, ask yourself, if I were to rent it, what can I get? That's my real value. And you say, yeah, but Peter, I invested all this money, I upgraded, I this and that. It doesn't really matter, because you got to be able to rent it out. In effect, it's a business. Now, you might be living there and maybe you have a lot of equity built up, which is great. Unfortunately, a lot of people that came after the pandemic, when it was work from home and we were going to be the crypto capital of the world, these people all swallowed the hook. They are in so high, now they need to get out. And unfortunately, they can't rent it for what they paid. So therefore, you need the discount, and that's what the market's showing.
So years ago, I remember, not too many, you'd hear, well, when there's a crash, it's not going to be like the one where all those homes were financed. But those condos, what percentage of those are paid in cash versus finance?
Well, if you listen to some reports coming out there, a lot of them are putting in 50% on the condo side. 50%. One of the reasons it is because the interest rates are what they are. What I say, 6.34, 6.35 is what they are. So what some people will do is they'll go and they'll buy it, and then they'll turn around and they'll take a loan against it. So they'll buy it cash, then they'll take out a loan. It'll be better terms. It won't be as for the same percentage of the loan amount, but that's what a lot of them do. But if you have cash, this is a time where you probably want to pay cash rather than get financing.
And most of these condos, these are east of.
This is countywide.
Countywide.
So this is going to be what I call Kendallandia, all the way over to Miami Beach.
So the ones that are downtown, typically, what does that buyer look like? Where are they from?
Depending on where you go, for instance, the Miami Realtor Association put out a report taking a look at pre-construction. And what they found is about 49% of pre-construction in the Tri-County area is going to be coming from abroad. 86% is coming from Latin America. But the way I'm answering your question is, if you go down across from the Kaseya Center, remember the old AAA, the old American Airlines Arena, from the Miami River north of the MacArthur Causeway, and then from the Bay to 95, they found that 99% are coming from Latin America.
So if you're going to qualify that as a good thing or bad thing or whatever, isn't that okay?
Well, it was okay during the Great Recession, because during the Great Recession, when basically people in the United States got tapped out and we had too many condos in South Florida and nobody to buy it, who came in and saved the day? It was a foreign buyer. Now, the U.S. dollar has weakened a lot since January. The problem, and this is very attractive because they can potentially get a discount. Remember, 33% discount, and they got more buying power because the dollar's lost about 10%, at least 10% since January. So you would think that we would have a repeat that we had during the Great Recession. The problem is we have a immigration strategy that is potentially chilling the ability of people from abroad to come in and buy, especially from Latin America. I don't know if you saw the Miami International Airport numbers. You should get somebody out from MIA. But in the first half of the year, their international passenger traffic down 1.2%. Coming into the year, they were supposed to grow by 8.5%. That's a 9.7% swing. Now, it's not a big number, but many of those people will come here. They'll fall in love with South Florida, like we all have done, and then they'll turn around and want to buy something. These are would-be buyers that potentially aren't coming at a time where our supply is growing and our prices are falling and the dollar is weakening. Whew. Well, I mean, remember, 6.1 million people, Tri-County area, 42% foreign-born. Miami-Dade County is close to 3 million people, and we're 55% foreign-born. So international is in our lifeblood. I live here because of the diversity. You suddenly lose this, this part of the overall formula. who steps in to take people out unless the prices are discounted?
Yep.
Nobody will.
Okay, let's let you have a. Did you want to talk that? I think we did the 4.
Yeah. We showed it.
So you people, you have a regular show. What's the name of your show?
So I'm doing 3 shows now.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm trying to mimic what you do. You're everywhere, so I'm doing that. So I'm doing a show on Mondays where I do it with my partner. We talk about some of the market conditions going on. I do what's called the Peter Zalewski show, which now it's basically it's something basically similar to this. You remember Larry Berger?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So Larry Berger, remember when he used to do a program with WLRN?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that. When I got here in the 90s, Larry Berger was the editor of Business Monday. He's the one who created it back when the Miami Herald, when people picked up the hard copy. And he had the show on WLRN, and it was something that I thought was really necessary. So I'm kind of doing that. Mimic much like what you're doing. I tend to have on like real estate personalities and other people in the business. So I am going to get you on. I'm going to invite you. I got you on the record now. I'm going to get you on that.
There you go, folks.
Yeah, that'll be Wednesdays, and then on Fridays I do a program with a colleague of Affair. Yeah, who works over at Compass, a guy called Daniel Hernandez. So we do a show and we kind of kick it around. He's more of a bull. I'm more of a bear, as you can tell.
I had noticed that, Peter. So you also have a club, and people can participate in your club, and there's certain information you give out to people that are there. But tell us about that.
Yeah, so the club basically is a way for me to share information, put stuff behind a paywall, and basically the analysis I'm running, the stuff we're spotting ahead of the curve. That we like when we get hired by Wall Street to do analysis, feasibility, anything like that. We're making it available for club members. A lot of people are into DIY, do it yourself. Even realtors, they're trying to figure out what's going on. So basically, I'm doing the same thing that I always do, same thing I do for Wall Street, but I make it available through the club. In addition to that, I do a monthly meeting. Wednesday, I'm doing a monthly meeting where I'm going to tell everybody what do we find and what do we project going forward. And then we do a meetup once a month in which people are able to come and talk shop with other club members.
When is this all going to balance out?
The market?
Yes.
Well, first of all, you got to deal with the cliff, the condo cliff. The condo cliff, if you play it out, you're probably looking at 2032.
Wow.
Yeah. So what we're doing right now is we're cleaning up from the cliff. Remember, you have to identify through the inspections. What's the condition of everything? Then you're going to have a shaking out, which we're starting to see. You go through the shaking out, then you have these buildings that will be terminated, which is basically when you're going to tear down a building, you're going to recycle it. Then you got to pre-sell it again, and then you got to build it. And by the time at the end of the day, you're probably looking 2030, 2032. But we're in the, like I said, we're skydiving right now. And we're hoping that cord's going to, when we pull that cord, that the chute's going to open.
So it's difficult to terminate homeowners associations.
It can be because it's like herding cats. You need to get a certain percentage of unit owners to all come into agreement, and everybody's brother-in-law and sister and colleague and neighbor tells them the place is worth this versus that, and whatever number comes in, that's not enough. We're getting ripped off. We're not going to sell, and that's why you don't see the terminations. But once people come to the realization of what the real costs are and the money has to be set aside, then you're going to start to see that come to religion moment where they start to say, okay, let's just get out.
So you have some of the old timers that have been in their units, let's say, 28 years. They
like the numbers we're showing, the vintage, the old units, they're not discounting at the same level as basically the speculators who've come in.
So if they stay there another 2 years, right, the 30 years there, or the 10 year after that, there's going to be a bill of stuff that has to, typically, of stuff that has to be done. And that's shared among all the condo owners. So it's not unusual. I've seen figures 10, 20, 30, 50, 70, 80, $100,000 per unit to fix the stuff.
So what we're telling people, and this is anecdotal because we haven't done any analysis yet, it hasn't all worked out because they haven't completed all the inspection. 4 stories or lower, $25,000 per door, per unit. 5 to 15, average $65,000. Over 15 stories, $100,000. You typically get 1 year to pay it. This is in addition to all your regular expenses.
That's on a 30-year or 10-year renewal?
That would be at the 30-year mark. But understand this. If you live in a condo, you need to know when it came online, when we got a certificate of occupancy, and expect every 10 years, you're getting a special assessment. From this point forward, you will have a special assessment every 10 years. And at the 30-year mark, you're getting a big one.
That's just the way it's going to be.
That's the cost of doing business.
So how has that changed compared to 5 years ago?
Well, 5 years ago, the state gave the condo associations the ability to defer. So you'd have a board. You have 3 members. One person was a roofer from New Jersey. He or she was on the board, and the roof was called in question. You take the elevator up to the roof. This is fine, not a problem. Now you can't do that anymore. Now you got to bring in an expert, a licensed architect, licensed engineer. They have to look at it. They have to analyze it. They have to make the report available for everybody to see. And more importantly, the state requires the association now has to fund it. So this is the difference. In the past, they would have been like, no, we don't need to do it. We can put it off. Now they can no longer do that. And why is that? That's because of insurance. The insurance industry wants to be sure that what they're insuring isn't going to be a repeat of Surfside, and lenders want to make sure if they're going to finance the work that the building can actually do everything that the experts say it can.
So if somebody doesn't pay let's say the $100,000 plus the monthly maintenance of $1,500 or $2,000 or whatever it happens to be.
Yep.
There's just a lien put on their property.
No, they get foreclosed.
They get foreclosed.
They'll get foreclosed. The association will take it over. And now once the lender realizes that the original owner and borrower is no longer there, the lender will foreclose on the association. I'm not an attorney. Check with your attorney. This is the way they've explained it to me. Now, if the association takes out a loan, and remember, a lot of banks are out there doing condo association financing. The interest rate typically comes in equivalent to what a mortgage is. So right now it'd be 6.34% or so. So what would happen is your individual units, from the way it's been explained to me by bankers, individual units aren't liened. What's liened is that right to collect money. So in theory, a bank could provide financing, typically 7 to 25 years would be the financing to fix it. Now, if the association stops paying, then the bank could turn around and move to foreclose on the association and or pull a coup d'etat.
And when the repairs are done,
yep,
all right, whatever dollars, whatever it is, that does not increase the value of the unit.
No.
It's just it's worth about what it was before.
Yep. It's just but it gives you something that's marketable. Right. If you don't have anybody looking to buy a condo, okay, you need to make sure you get a signed report. Whatever it is, any condo you're buying, make sure you got a signed report from a licensed architect, licensed engineer. If you do not have that, you're stabbing in the dark. Even if you do have it, you're probably stabbing in the dark because things happen. But at least you have that assurance that somebody actually eyeballed it and somebody's license could be at stake and their freedom could be at stake if there's an issue in what they're doing. So you want to have one of these reports. And if you don't have a report, you're basically stabbing in the dark. But understand, every 10 years, you're getting a special assessment. So if you're out there looking at a great deal and you think you are smarter than anybody else, chances are the seller's trying to get out. They're trying to front run the special assessment that's coming, make you feel special, and then you're going to be the one who gets caught and hooked up with special assessment rather than the seller.
Okay, you said from 5 stories down, it was about how much?
Yeah. 4 stories or lower, $25,000 a door. 5 stories to 15, call it $65,000 a unit, and then 15 and higher, you're going to come in at $100,000 from what we're seeing.
And so often people that are in a condo association, they don't want to pay it. They think they're getting ripped off, and then in the past, the board could elect to defer it.
Yeah, they could simply defer the whole thing, and that's what happened in Surfside. So the final report's coming out, and what they're saying is basically it was lack of maintenance, is a lack of upkeep. And if you listened and followed that case, and I wasn't involved in any way, but if you followed that case, what you found is the people were not fixed income, but they were all buying there because it was an affordable way to live directly on the ocean. So they were willing to put up with the fact that it was run down a bit inside because they got to live in the ocean. But ultimately, it turned out to be detrimental.
Yep. So lots of changes. And folks, this guy is definitely a bear, all right? But he has the data to prove it.
Listen, I grind it. I pull my own data. I don't rely on anybody else. And what I will tell you is we live in a sell side market, which means everybody's selling you stuff. I'm on the other side. I tend to, when I don't practice real estate, but when I do practice, it tends to be with buyers. It's much easier to analyze and rip apart somebody's argument than it is to make that argument. And the industry is making the argument right now that everything's fine, and I'm here to rip it apart.
I think on your website, can we put that website up there? I think somewhere in there you have buy, sell, or hold.
Which is a podcast I do.
Yes, that's the name of that.
Yeah, Buy, Sell, Hold with Daniel Hernandez
and
from
people
Compass.
can find you all over the internet. You got shows everywhere. Google loves you. I keep feeding them because they're hungry. I keep giving them the stuff. Peter, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure, Michael.
We appreciate it. Folks, thank you for joining us. And remember what Disney does. They got the new Disney rule, which is when you hug someone, don't stop until they